Ray and Kurt and Ruth, thanks again for putting together this outline for us. We had a great discussion about it during our development team call yesterday.
It's April 2022, and we're inside a pitch meeting, as they call it in showbiz.
And every time I have conversations with people about it, it goes to all kinds of sort of deeper places.
You're hearing Ray Nowosielski, one of the people my angel colleagues and I recruited in so many ways to help create this podcast.
And I like the fact that people hand wave it as like, oh my God, Wonderful Life, like so not cool, so played out, so cliche. And it's like, no. If you start talking about this movie, you're going to go to controversial places almost automatically.
We don't necessarily have a pinpointed, exactly what we're researching for this project.
And this is Ruth Vaca, a creative and Ray's longtime business partner. She's also his spouse and mother of their 4-year-old son, Pablo.
We know and we sense that there is a large influence of the film and society in little towns, and a lot of people find themselves reflecting every Christmas, like they watch the movie and they think about where they came from and, what world are they living in? Are they living in Bedford Falls? Are they living in Pottersville? Are they living in none of that, and that neither world exists where they're at? I mean, it's just more of an identity of America that we are researching.
I'm taking you to a year and a half after Ray sees this podcast greenlit, as they say, by iHeart. Only weeks before some of you are listening to this, Ray is at a crossroads, of a type by now you should be familiar with over this podcast. Suddenly, Ray and Ruth are having a rather challenging year financially, leaving them to wonder about their current lives and question what to do with their youthful ambitions.
Hey.
Hey, so what's the word?
Kurt, the thing that's so ironic is that this podcast and iHeart greenlighting it was supposed to be the thing that would help me finally get to that next place I was trying to go, and yet I've never felt more like George Bailey heading to the bridge than I do right now.
Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight and dance by the light of the moon? George Bailey, I'm lucky to the day I die. George Bailey, every Christmas you can make me cry. Oh, George Bailey, I'm lucky to the day I die.
Uncle Rocky asked me a few years ago well before he was ill, to eulogize him when his time came. I want to tell you that it's one of the greatest honors that I've ever experienced to be here speaking about this man.
It's 2013 in Pekin, a small town in Illinois. Ray's uncle, the rock of his family and his community, has joined us up here earlier than anyone would have liked. A devoted union leader working for Caterpillar and a tough youth football coach, he rubbed off on his short and artistic nephew, Ray, who grew up wanting to prove he could be a real leader and impact his world just like his beloved uncle.
I'm not the greatest speaker, but I think a few days ago it occurred to me one of Uncle Rocky's favorite things to do was to put me on the spot and watch me squirm. And of course, when he passed away, I thought, well, that's all over. And he found a way to do it one more time in front of everyone he knows.
Ray's nervous, but he surprises the large crowd at this funeral with a rare show of speaking confidence. For years afterward, family members will say that his uncle came down angel-like and helped him.
When I was a little kid, my mom introduced me to her favorite movie, and it became my favorite movie, called It's a Wonderful Life. And it tells the story of a man who basically stays around the same place where he was born, and he never achieves any great wealth or political power, but by choosing to do the right thing when it counted over and over again, he made such an impact on the lives of his family, his friends, and his community that to imagine a world in which he hadn't existed would have meant a much different and sadder world for all of those people. And as hard as it may be, I'd like to pause for a second and have everyone imagine what your life and what you think this community would have been like had Rocky Duffin never existed.
I'm taking you to 1947, inside the Empire Theater in Pekin. 15-year-old Betty Hartman watches with her parents the movie Wonderful Life during its initial theatrical run. The family are impoverished and take odd jobs wherever they can find them. Wonderful Life becomes young Betty's favorite movie. And now it's 1975, inside the living room of a small house in Pekin. Betty is now an adult, watching her favorite film with her 15-year-old daughter, Valerie. Wonderful Life sparks something in Valerie, becoming her favorite movie, too. 1996, inside another living room. This one, a firmly middle-class ranch house just built by a local farmer in Brownsburg, a suburb of Indianapolis 200 miles east of Pekin. And Valerie's 15-year-old son, Ray, hosts a party to celebrate the premiere of his latest short movie, one about Christmas, funded by one of his uncles.
Well, Uncle Jim's real humble here, but he was the writer of the screenplay that this was based off of, and he is the producer.
Ray's talking about his uncle, Valerie's brother, who happens to be named Jimmy Stewart, but to be clear, not the actor.
Well, Ray likes old movies, and we've been trying to get this particular movie for him for quite some time, so I'd like to present that to him.
As the party wraps up, Ray plays his Uncle Jim's gift, a DVD of Wonderful Life. Unlike his mother and grandmother, at age 15, this is around the 15th time that Ray is seeing this movie.
I want to do something big, something important. Something big, something important.
That's DVD skipping.
Ray was born in January 1981, the same month Ronald Reagan entered the White House. His parents never graduated college, but worked hard and were smart and kind. They got where they were hoping to go, and they have big hopes for Ray. His mother, Valerie, has passed the family's favorite movie to him. That, in a nutshell, is how we angels, wanting to see Wonderful Life continue to offer a way forward for you, helped Ray become a co-creator of this podcast. Like everything else, though, there's more to it. When Ray is young, he becomes obsessed with the sliding doors concept and the butterfly effect of every decision, thanks to another movie, a hit one of his youth, 1989's Back to the Future Part 2.
Prior to this point in time, somewhere in the past, the timeline skewed into this tangent, creating an alternate 1985.
He convinces his third-grade classmates at his Catholic elementary school to spend their recesses memorizing lines to Back to the Future Part 1, and then convinces his teachers to let them put it on as a play at the end of the school year. Everyone involved loves it so much that they do it again for Part 2 and 3 in the 4th grade. 4 years later, Maggie McLean, Ray's favorite teacher, assigns him to look into her favorite president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And while doing that, he ends up getting to know a documentary filmmaker at the local PBS station. It's then he realizes he wants to make movies about true stories. At his 8th grade graduation, he promises Maggie he will take her with him to his first Oscars ceremony.
I have a question. How did you get so involved with the movie and made it a big part of your career and life?
This is Tom Tenowich. You heard him in the first episode. The television writer behind Mork and Mindy and much more. He's being interviewed by Ray, but turns the tables on him.
My little personal anecdote is that I married my high school sweetheart, which was just a case of young and dumb. It was not a smart idea. There were a lot of signs that it wasn't going to work. But right before we got married, everyone who knew me growing up knew that I wanted to leave Indianapolis and go off to the cities and be a big shot and make movies and all this stuff. And she just put the brakes on it right before we were going to get married. I was like, you're George Baileying me, because she was saying, like, I don't think I can leave Indianapolis. I want to stay near family. And I was like, what? And I was very afraid I would end up never having the chance to, find out if I could do it, and what other people were like in places that weren't Indianapolis. And so we got divorced. Had no kids. There was really nothing to split. We had no money, so everything turned out okay. Then I later in New York met the love of my life, who I now am married to and have a child with and all that. So
Ray and the love of his life, Ruth, marry in Central Park on Thanksgiving Day 2017 as the Macy's Parade is taking place blocks away. Before a small group of 40, a tight-budget wedding, each promises they will never let the other give up on pursuing their dreams, on becoming who they want to be.
I can see what George wanted at age 21, and I can see how heartbreaking it would have been to be trapped and never even get to try and see if if you were actually good, if you could have made it out there, kind of thing,
We're in New York City several years before their wedding, and Ruth and Ray return after several years away in Los Angeles and Austin. It is then that Ray is given a big opportunity to see his career advance where they always hoped it would go. He takes a position with Barbara Koppel, the beloved documentary filmmaker who had won 2 Oscars. Her first when she was only 30. Frank Capra was 37 when he won his first one.
I'd like to dedicate this film to the people of the Midwest and the families and the meatpackers in Austin, Minnesota, whose American dream is so precious and so vital.
This is Barbara accepting her second Oscar, only 2 years older than Ray is in 2023.
And they went out on strike for their slice of the American dream and were permanently replaced.
Working with Barbara, Ray is soon going to film festivals with movies he has produced, going to award shows with nominations. For Ruth and Ray, having partnered on their mutual success and supported each other's goals with optimism for years, it has all worked out. Or so it seems.
I got to get it out of my system, so to speak, and New York rents were too damn high. Ruth and I wanted to have a baby, but Ruth didn't want to have our first baby far from family or, in like a tiny apartment in New York City. So that's how I ended up in Bloomington, Indiana, where we are now, which is kind of ironic that I willingly chose to come back there to Indiana here. But that's kind of it. And I love Tom's description of especially that idea of like, oh, would my wife really have been better off if she'd married that other guy? Or would I live a better life if I could just do this? Or is my life wonderful? Should I have an acceptance for what the actuality is?
That teacher Ray promised to take to the Academy Awards with him, Maggie, joined us up here in 2007. Ray has yet to attend an Oscars ceremony.
And if you're honest, you'll realize that there are things there that you have to deal with and clean up, change.
Tom Tenowich again, talking this all through with Ray.
But it's nice to start off a little bit if you feel that you're on top But if you have any humanity in you, you're going to be forced to look at the other side of it, which is what's so special about you, you know. And you might find some good things, but you'll also find some things that are not so good. And if you're willing to deal with them and change them, you might not have to have another wonderful life moment.
Hey.
Hey.
All right. Do you so you want to go over the schedule?
Ray has spent his life pursuing his childhood dream of making an impact and a living through storytelling. He thought he'd be a bit further along on that by now. Although he has managed to publish a book and produce a number of successful documentary films over his career, he's 42 years old, and it hasn't all gone exactly as he had hoped. Now it's starting to seem like this podcast could be his last chance, and time is short. He's worried. Not jumping off the bridge worried, but still worried.
The budget from iHeart was very respectable, but it's a podcast budget, and as you know, we've essentially done 9 full documentaries here, right, with trips and real journalism, a lot of research, 200 conversations, I think it is, archival collection, and I know we've both ended up doing like a lot of volunteer hours, and your wife Elizabeth cutting these episodes. Sorry if I sound like I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I guess that's a little George Bailey too.
Upon their relocation to Bloomington, Indiana, and soon amidst a global pandemic, Ray and Ruth decided to have 2 babies. The first became little Pablo. The second was their own production company that would allow them to be independent, a little like Frank Capra tried to do with Liberty Films. And Ruth, too, threw herself into trying to make their company a success, while, like so many women, often having to take the lead on all that was required with a new young son. 5 years in, after feeling like a growing success, things have suddenly slowed down, the money becoming unpredictable. And as so many do when struggle appears, Ruth and Ray started to question each other, their decisions, and themselves.
So you finally got your, what you think is like your big break. Like, okay, I've got a green light that took me no hassle to get. I'm working on my favorite project. I've got a great team working with me, and I'm not making enough money to live.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so frustrating.
Ray has recruited an ally in the documentary world, Kurt Engfer, to help him get his passion project off the ground. Kurt, who helped sell this podcast to iHeartMedia, experienced his documentary film Bowling for Columbine with director Michael Moore become a nominee at the 2003 Academy Awards. It won the Oscar, as Ray watched on TV.
And then have to, be filling out job applications or, feverishly searching, me just chasing money. The whole myth, if I just try to be a good person and focus on that and focus on doing what I think I do well, the money will come. And that has not at all been the case. for a while now. Oh my God, did I tell you? My GMC's engine just stopped working, and the mechanic says minimum $5,000 to fix it. Anyway, it's the whole point of moving to Bloomington, leaving the New York dream behind, was that we weren't supposed to struggle in a place like Bloomington, Indiana. And I'm only renting a 3-bedroom house. I don't own anything. And what's really freaking me out though, Kurt, is that this little financial skid, I can tell, is causing Ruth to question if we should keep doing this. I can feel her starting to let go. And it's the first time in our whole relationship since I met her, I'm feeling her let go of her own dreams. We have to make consistent money for Pablo. And I think that's now, after this year, it's can we do that while still doing this? Our whole deal together was, that hope for what we could accomplish together. And I if we lose that hope, it's going to totally change our relationship. That's my fear. And so, for the first time, I'm worried about the future for our whole little family, and that's not something that I saw coming even as recently as a year ago when we landed this deal for my dream podcast with iHeart.
And that's the parallel, right, with George, right? You know, he's doing everything right, and he still ends up $8,000 in the hole, and Potter's threatening to have him arrested. Both the podcast and the film are indictment of the actual, system that our society functions in. I think is that you're a victim of this system, just like George Bailey is, and you're just as powerless as he is.
Amidst his conversation with Kurt, suddenly Ray realizes that his life is mirroring some of the darker themes of the life of his hero, George Bailey.
In the audio, how many times have I told the story when I married my high school sweetheart, and then all of a sudden she put the brakes on me going off to the cities and, seeing what it was all about, which I'd wanted to do my whole life, and I thought that was getting George Bailey'd, and I've always used George Bailey as a verb. And I was getting George Bailey. But that was George Bailey in Act 1, right? Like, really getting George Bailey is coming to some form of acceptance of letting go of some aspects of those youthful, selfish dreams. And you think you get to a point by midlife where you're okay and things are going really well. And then something just comes along and pulls the rug out from under you, and you again are wondering, what has this whole thing been about? And, basically, did I fail?
Well, I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that you can make a living at it. I think that this could be a really good way to deal with a lot of things that we haven't been able to really deal with in the actual podcast while dealing with the podcast itself.
This should be what the 10th episode is about, the one we can't seem to figure out.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hey, thanks so much for taking a little time. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I thought it might be good to get a few updates for you and ask you a few follow-up questions. How's your family?
Hey, the family's great.
A few weeks before some of you are first listening to this, Ray calls Menzo Case. You remember that real George Bailey in Seneca Falls.
Just got the news we're going to have another grandchild in September.
Wow. Congratulations. Which child is having the grandchild?
Desiree is going to have her second child. That's pretty exciting.
Was Desiree the one I met?
I don't know. No, I think you met Raquel.
Well, way to go. That's fantastic. Yeah. So another one for Christmas next year.
Yeah, I hope so. Yep. Looking forward to it.
As Ray struggles to figure out his personal problems and finish this episode, he decides to take a cue from Wonderful Life and try focusing outside himself on the problems of others. He makes a series of phone calls, including to Menzo, whose vision of an affordable housing project in Seneca Falls Ray finds so inspiring.
And we're talking about low, moderate income, median income being about $76,000. So you start to talk $76,000 family, what are they going to be able to afford? It's not going to be a $600,000 home. It's going to be something closer to nowadays $200,000, $150,000, and we need to do those for those families. But that's not a big ticket item for some of these bigger developers, and I get it, but that's what we need. Despite our best efforts, we continue to drive a wedge between communities and separating the haves and the have-nots, and the distance between the two is getting greater.
And you're doing a great thing, and we want to help in any way we can. Because it really ties into the two key themes of the show have sort of risen from all these conversations we've had around Wonderful Life, and it really is about the George Baileys of the world finding a way to get working people and middle class people into homes in towns where they want to live, and then also hopelessness and the rise in suicidality and how we can counter the cynicism of the times. So
right, yeah. And that's what we're hoping for as well.
You said the Bailey Park sign is like being built or constructed now, or it's already done?
Yeah, I met with the metal fabricator, so it's always available for people to go there, get a picture, Bailey Park entrance. It's just fun. But
Yeah,
it's
no,
going to draw attention.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you put the sign up there, and the rest kind of takes on more momentum. Yeah.
So I've got a lot to do, but the first thing I had to do was get the town on board. The town's on board. They're working toward getting water and sewer. So from that standpoint, that's a win. I like to think it's still the American dream to own a piece of real estate, to have a part in the community, and to be a part of something much bigger than themselves. And that, to me, is America. It's not about growing, getting wealth, and becoming affluent. It's about being part of something that's much bigger than yourself, and finding your place in the community. I mean, we need people that work in factories, in service jobs, and they're not menial, they're meaningful. And then they're the ones that we call on to help in times of crisis or in times of need. These are the same people that will man our ambulances and our fire trucks. And if we don't build that, we're going to start seeing, like, our volunteer fire departments, they're going to fall apart because we can't get volunteers, because the affluent don't want to do that. They don't participate in those things. That's a shame, because that's Americana.
I so love how you talk about this and how you think about it. Thank you. You're doing God's work. I really appreciate you putting up with me. And
Not a problem. I appreciate it.
All right.
Yep. Take
Bye.
care. Yep. Bye.
After connecting with someone in his universe who is working on George Bailey's pet issue, housing for working people, Ray begins thinking about how wonderful life itself might continue to counter that other issue that plagued George Bailey, and now begins to plague Ray: hopelessness. One person who has done more than perhaps anyone else in recent years to keep Wonderful Life relevant in the eyes of modern audiences, and to direct that toward helping others, is Matt Asner, son of Ed Asner, the actor. Through a friend, Ray and Matt connect.
My dad played Santa about 20 times. He did films where he didn't play Santa, so I would say he probably did 30 Christmas films or holiday-inspired films.
If you're of a certain age, you probably remember Ed from his role as Lou Grant in The Mary Tyler Moore Show, one of the biggest hits on television in the early 1970s.
Mary, I haven't had Christmas off in 7 years.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, it's not too bad. You get used to it. Christmas is just like any other day when you work in a newsroom. You know what I mean?
No.
Oh. You gotta work on Christmas.
I really grew up on that set. It was more of the family atmosphere of that set that I really remember. And walking onto the set in the morning with my dad, and I would be there all day, and I wouldn't necessarily stay at the set all day. I'd go and run around and get in trouble on the lot.
Younger listeners probably know Matt's father Ed better from another Christmas movie, Elf.
Buddy, is that you? Are you okay? Boy, am I glad to see you. The clausometer suddenly just dropped down to 0. There's just no Christmas spirit anymore.
I think Elf has some of that stuff that It's a Wonderful Life has. So I think there's interesting thing about Elf, though, is either people love it or hate it. And I think It's a Wonderful Life is similar in that way. I think less people hate It's a Wonderful Life.
Funny footnote. Ed Asner's Mary Tyler Moore spin-off television show, Lou Grant, was one of the very first to make reference to Wonderful Life.
Shannon Hart, boy, she was in some great pictures. Remember the one she was in with Jimmy Stewart? It's a Wonderful Town. It's a Wonderful Life. That was Donna Reed.
My dad and I would watch, old movies on TV. Occasionally, It's a Wonderful Life would come on that. It just blew my mind. It was what I wanted in this world. It's what I want my world to look like. And my father certainly felt the same way. So we had that bond. And so every holiday we would get together and watch this film.
Pop, you want a shock? I think you're a great guy.
thankfully, it's a film that you can watch 20,000 times and not get tired of it. It became a warm blanket for me during the winter. That's why we started this project of reading it, in December for the Ed Asner Family Center.
The Ed Asner Family Center was created to support what doctors now call neurodivergent people, their loved ones, and the community. It has raised a lot of money for this cause.
My wife and I together have 3 sons on the spectrum. So that's what the catalyst was. We wanted to create a place that provided what we were so desperate to receive when we were bringing up our children. And that's why we created the Ed Asner Family Center. Let's pick a holiday film and let's do it, let's do it as a reading. Having Pete Davidson involved in the first year was, I think, it set something in motion that I think has existed for all the years we've done it.
Now, Pop, I couldn't. I couldn't face being cooped up for the rest of my life in a shabby little office. I'm sorry, Pop. I didn't mean that remark, but this business of nickels and dimes and spending all your life trying to figure out how to save 3 cents on a length of a pipe, I'd go crazy. I want to do something big and something important.
He doesn't say yes to a lot of things, and he did to this immediately because it was his favorite film, and he watched it every year with his father. And because of that, he did it.
Pete's father, you may know, was a New York City firefighter who joined us up here on September 11th, 2001.
We've made, I think, interesting and timely choices with all of our George Baileys. It's a perfect storm of juice. I think that they want to play these parts because they're so wonderful and so iconic. But I do think they do it because they want to help the Ed Asner Family Center.
You said what I mean. Why, you just said a minute ago that they had to wait and save their money before they even ought to think about, a decent home.
Jason Sudeikis, a big fan of the film, and we got him right at the height of Ted Lasso, mania.
Wait. I mean, wait for what? Wait until their children grow up and leave them? Until they're so old and broken down that do you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000?
Yeah, if it hadn't been for me, everybody'd be a lot better off. My wife and my kids and my friends. Look, little fella, will you just go off and haunt somebody else, will you?
And here's Brendan Fraser, the actor, in 2022. In 1 month, he'll be nominated for an Oscar, one he goes on to win.
I started in this business 30 years ago, and things, they didn't come easily to me.
Did you feel Jimmy Stewart at all when you were doing the performance? The spirit, it overtakes you. It's like a privilege to speak those words and those lines. Iconic dialogue. It feels good to say aloud.
I think most people have an altruistic bone in their body. I think that's why, tearjerker movies do so well. That's why, It's a Wonderful Life does so well. I mean, we all want to be that person. We all want to be that person that helps people, that takes a bullet for someone. We all want to be that person. But sometimes we get bogged down in life and in the hardship of life.
If you shoot pool with some employee here, you can come and bank and borrow money. What does that get us? A discontented, lazy rabble instead of a thrifty working class.
He had always wanted to do Mr. Potter. He loved that role, and he loved Lionel Barrymore and loved the way Lionel Barrymore did it. He did it very differently than Lionel Barrymore. He just really wanted to do the role of Mr. Potter. We were actually going to have him read Clarence in the second year.
Ed Asner, the much-admired Emmy-winning actor, has died.
When you have a father that is so powerful in terms of the output they put into the world, it's daunting. It's a daunting thing. It's, oh my God, how am I going to follow that? Like George Bailey, my father was my hero. He was my hero. He is my hero. And I use him as an example every day that I live. for decisions that I make. And I look at it that way. He's the ultimate guidepost for me in life. We're going to forget about It's a Wonderful Life at some point as a culture. It's going to end up leaving us at some point. I think people more and more don't gravitate to black and white. The younger generations are about color and action and effects, and it's our films have become more about that. So you have less and less of a patience threshold for black and white films. Eventually, it is going to be Die Hard and Elf and other films that kind of take the banner.
Ray, you'll remember, is a new father, and Matt's talk of fathers and sons strikes a chord with him. Ray's own father is also his hero, a man he admires precisely because he has never sought the spotlight, but has always found contentment through consistent, simple acts of kindness, and by appreciating what they call the little things in life. But, much like George Bailey's attempt to explain to his father why he can't take over the building and loan, Ray always felt he was built differently than his dad, that he had to pursue a very different path. Now raising little Pablo, Ray wonders which path is the one he should be guiding his own son down. It is then Ray recalls a movie often described as his father's generation's wonderful life.
But you never know when you make something that you're still going to be talking about it 25 years from now.
Is that the one you hear about the most, Field of Dreams? I mean, you've been in so many.
I hear about it a lot.
This is Kevin Costner, the actor, talking to Seth Meyers, the comedian.
Field of Dreams certainly has been characterized, at least by me, as our generation's It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah. It's such a lyric film and a beautiful film and father-son stuff. I feel, whenever you can nail that, it does have a timeless quality.
Yeah, and that's a hard one for us to nail in real life. And I think it is about things that go unsaid between people.
My father's name was John Kinsella. He played in the minors for a year or two, but nothing ever came of it. Moved to Brooklyn in 35, married Mom in 38, and was already an old man working at the naval yards when I was born in 1952. My name's Ray Kinsella.
Kevin Costner plays an idealistic American baby boomer named Ray, a father and everyman reaching middle age with regrets, mostly about his relationship with his greatest generation dad, who he feels, like George Bailey's, has died too soon.
I'm 36 years old, I love my family, I love baseball, and I'm about to become a farmer. But until I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my whole life.
Through heavenly intervention, Ray is given a second chance and a new direction at midlife.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I'd like that.
I admire my dad so much.
Yet another creative call between Kurt and Ray.
He was right. He told me from the beginning. He had it nailed. He was like, all you need to do is find a steady living and then live below it. And my dad never lived to work. He worked to live. He's a great guy. He still gives me advice to this day, but I see him get so much joy out of all the little things in daily life, and I would love to do that if I weren't working around the clock to make sure we get to still live in this house next month. But yeah, I should have followed my dad's advice. I just wasn't built that way.
This whole podcast thing that you're kind of coming up with it's kind of odd. So this might be a real good way for people to understand why this is actually important, because they're seeing your journey through this topic and through understanding why this film is important to you, what this film's meant to you, why this film has relevance to people today. And I think a lot of people think that maybe it doesn't. Maybe this film has kind of this past its shelf life a little bit. But I think really this film is even more relevant today.
The notes I keep hearing from friends that listen to this are like, they keep trying to get me back to, okay, but what's the point? What's the point? I don't want to tell people the point, but obviously in a 10th episode, people have taken a 9-episode journey. And now they want to know, all right, where are you going with all this?
So yes, in that way, this actually is possibly a good 10th episode, because it could do a lot of heavy lifting. It could summarize well and point to possible futures and why this film is important and why we need it.
Ray remembers another movie that, like Field of Dreams, is often considered a modern torchbearer, keeping the ethos of wonderful life alive today in a new way. A movie that, it occurs to Ray, has a personal connection for Ruth and him.
And when you stand in the snow, you look like an angel.
How are you doing this?
I told you, I wake up every day right here, right in Punxsutawney, and it's always February 2nd. And there's nothing I can do about it.
We all remember Andy McDowell in the comedy hit Groundhog Day.
When you look back on your career, Andy, is there one that stands out more than the others? One of those?
I would say, for me, Groundhog Day was a perfect movie. And
Yes.
I had it's sort of like A Wonderful Life, in that, you know, you watch this movie and it makes you realize how gorgeous life is and how to be a good person. There's a really deep message to it.
I mean, I'm a kid. I don't understand how banks work. And here's Jimmy Stewart explaining it to me very clearly. One version is a community model where everybody's helping everybody, and the other one is a model of rapacious, selfish capitalism. And I think I had an opinion about it, if not before. From that moment on, it seemed to align with the way I looked at the world.
Ray has reached out for insights to Danny Rubin, the writer of 1993's Groundhog Day. Just before his big hit, Danny was feeling frustrated with the pace of achieving his dreams, like Ray is now.
I had a general feeling that everybody reaches a point in their life where they're kind of stuck. It might feel like, I'm bigger than the job that I have. I should be somewhere else in my career. And that sort of was the starting point for me of that character. I think when Harold got a hold of it, and worked with Bill Murray on it, he needed to make a broader leap and kind of establish that Phil was a very self-centered person and have that be something for him to overcome.
I'm sorry? What was that again?
I'm a god.
You're God.
I'm a god. I'm not the god. I don't think.
Phil Connors is an American baby boomer of the yuppie variety, played by Bill Murray, the actor, who, through cosmic intervention, comes to see a deeper meaning to life.
I sort of interpreted it as Phil just seeing himself and everyone else in the world was serving him and is in relationship to him and his desires. What transformed for him is he starts to see people outside of himself. He sees that other people have lives, and also sees that everything that he does influences them. And that gives him not only a sense of empathy, but he actually sees a better life for himself. He's happier because he's not just trying to fulfill his own satisfactions and goals, but he sees himself in relationship to the community.
Nice speech, Bill. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks. How was that for you two?
Hey, man, you touched me.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
What is it?
Oh, thank you, young man.
It's nothing, ma'am. I had the tie around the jack. Just be comfortable, all right? Be a minute.
Ray has a second motive for his conversation with Danny. A romantic gesture he hopes may remind Ruth of the wonderful life they are living.
You've already given me a favor. I want to ask a really annoying one. Would you stay on for 30 more seconds so I can just introduce you to my wife? She'll just say hi, and then we'll get off the Zoom. Is that okay?
What's her name?
Ruth.
Ruth, my favorite aunt.
And when we started dating 13 years ago, we basically, before we knew we were going to be an item, we, from two different coasts, like, watched and were on the phone with each other doing Groundhog Day, and that's how that became. So, if you wouldn't mind, I think she would really like it. Hold on one sec, please. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Ruth. Oh my God, it's been ages.
I just didn't want to wrap.
Remember?
That is
Danny Rubin.
That is crazy. Does he know about our situation?
Yeah, but I'm not going to rebore him with it. But yeah, I told him at the top that we would watch it every year. And then
Yeah. Like when we were long distance, we would literally watch it via speakerphone, like ridiculous. So stupid.
Oh, that's so sweet. It's like looking at the moon at the same time.
We were looking at Bill Murray relive his life at the same time over and over again. No, we're huge fan. Awesome movie. Yeah.
Well,
thanks.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you both, actually.
Thank you. You too.
Hopefully we can hang in person one day. let me fan out, please.
All right, Danny. Thank you very much. I'll let you know when the podcast is coming out.
That sounds great. Congratulations on the whole thing. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully we land it. We land that plane.
Hi, honey.
Hi, Mom.
Something comes along a few weeks before some of you are hearing this podcast that makes Ray's problems begin to seem self-indulgent, lacking perspective. Maybe the best word would be unimportant.
So I got a call from the real George Bailey you mentioned, who's building Bailey Park. I got a call from his assistant.
Yeah, what's his name? Is that Menzo?
Menzo case, yep. But I just got a call from his assistant, and he had a massive heart attack.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You okay?
He's alive. He was in critical condition, but every day he was making it was a stronger chance that he would end up being okay. And at this point, it's been, I think, about 5 days. And so they're watching him closely, but it looks like he'll be okay.
Oh my God. Oh man, that makes me sick.
But it was the first thing I thought of is speaking of like the importance of every individual, like the reality of whether working people will actually have the opportunity to have homes in this town. It's dependent on this guy, and Seneca Falls is basically going to find out for a while until he recovers what life is like without their George, and it's going to be different.
God. Oh my God. Yeah. And maybe, oh wow, Ray, he sounds like such a good man. And, he can be very proud of his life, it sounds like, and the impact that he's had. And that's it, Ray. It's like, we all have the ability to have impact. And for some of us, it might just be on a few people, right? That we could be mentored or coached or helped in some way along the way. And in others, it could be a bigger impact because you're able to do bigger things like tell stories, get movies, get books out there, get, podcasts out there. And so I think we all have impact in different ways. Because
on social media, we want to have a hashtag Save George Bailey campaign where we're going to try to encourage people to share stories about the George Baileys and
in their lives,
retweet them or whatever. Yeah, and try to foster a recognizing your George Bailey.
And what a great way to get positivity out there.
3 weeks later, on Friday, October 13th, 2023, Menzo is surrounded by his beloved family when he joins us up here. Those counting on affordable housing in Seneca Falls will now discover what their world is like without their George Bailey. Life is all a matter of perspective, as it was for George Bailey, and events, as they often do, force that perspective on Ray, who realizes he has had a wonderful life. No matter what happens with his finances, no matter what happens with his youthful dreams, no matter what happens with this podcast, and much like George, he receives support from his loved ones when he needs it the most.
I thought getting George Bailey'd was essentially being made by one force or another to sacrifice like your dreams that you want in your youth and sort of settle. And it's interesting because marry hatch is a verb too. And it's essentially being strong enough and good enough to be the George Bailey but being made like the second banana. And in her case, it's willingly, but like with Ruth, it's sort of like we were both George Baileys in a way with the big dreams. And that's when we met, we were going to support those. And having the kid and then the pandemic and all this stuff definitely had a disjointed effect on, like, we went all in on who was the big money maker and what was needed. And that, as usual, meant that the female out of the partnership, was doing the full-time childcare stuff, and I was earning the dollars, and she comes out of the last 5 years in some ways, having been Mary Bailey, when she's like, I ain't no Mary.
We all, as we are born, as we grow up, we all have hopes and dreams. And some of us have those exact hope and dreams that we were born with realized, right? And then you have other people who, maybe their hopes and dreams that they realize end up better than what they ever dreamed, right? And I kind of feel like that's part of what this story is all about. It's like George had hopes and dreams, and as much as he tried to make all those happen at certain periods of time, life had other plans for him. And I think ultimately they end up being better plans because, like we all know, it's the people you're surrounded with, your family, who you love, who loves back. Those are the things that really make you rich and really make your dreams what they are. And, I just feel, and when you have someone, and your ex could never have been this for you, okay? But when you find that person who is your true partner, sometimes that means they take a little bit of a back seat because you're taking the forward seat for all kinds of reasons. And then sometimes life happens where then they come up and they take the front seat, right? And that's what true partnership is. So I think that, and that's what George Bailey had. He ended up with, and that's what he found out. He was a rich man, not because, he built big things or went great places or, put his name on some old, building a loan or whatever, right? It was because he had Mary and their children and this life surrounded by friends who would do anything for him because he was that kind of person and deserved that.
But that involves acceptance, because if you refuse to let go of those dreams or refuse to embrace what the universe has given you, there's some level of acceptance that seems to be
acceptance there. Or sometimes I think you may be referring to, or does it feel like to you it's selling out? Or
that's what I thought. I don't think that anymore. I actually, but there is that question, right?
I mean, I think you're in a relationship where you are finally happy and supported, and you have someone that's an equal, and and you've got a beautiful son who is a joy, and lots of family around you guys that love you. So, George, I think you did okay, and you're not done yet. You're not done yet. And wouldn't it be cool if this particular podcast launched you a little bit further on and up towards where you want to be?
Like, to me, the hardest thing to watch the movie isn't him on a bridge or in the bar or anything. It's when he comes into the house after finding out that Uncle Billy's lost the money, and then them tearing the town apart and not being able to find it. He comes into the house, and everyone's all happy and Christmassy, and the kids are like, hey, Dad, did you bring the wreath? And he's like, what wreath?
Kurt again, talking with Ray.
And, Mary knows something's going on. But George, being the guy and being a non-communicative male, isn't telling her anything, And he's trying to keep it all inside and thinking that there's got to be a way he can fix it. That's part of the problem, is thinking that you alone can fix the problem. there wouldn't have been much of a movie if George had just talked to Mary, because she's the smart one. George he's the firebrand, spark plug. He's the guy that gets things going. He's the guy everyone likes. But Mary's the one with like the wheels turning in the background, thinking, okay, how are we going to make this happen?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? He keeps just trying to do George stuff that he isn't good at, which all this logical planning and thinking and investigating. And Mary gets on the phone and starts making calls. She's like burning down the phone lines, and
Oh man, Ruth would have so much to say on that. Like what you just said sounds so much like her and me. She's really been that person for me, even though it's funny because we're both like head in the clouds dreamers, but she's proved herself better at actually focusing in on like, all right, what actually needs to happen here to keep the train on the tracks.
I just have never stopped believing in our potential.
Yeah.
And so I just don't feel like we have hit our potential yet. And so it frustrates me to know that we are both capable of living in that dream of our childhoods, and we're not there yet. And yes, this is good, but this isn't what I wanted.
We're inside an honest conversation between a married couple, Ray and Ruth. One of many like this they've been having lately. After hitting a financial skid, much like George Bailey on Christmas Eve 1945, Ray and Ruth are doubting themselves and each other.
I remember this 1 week after Pablo turned 1, and I was so ready to like just be in business again, like working hard and focusing on something and using my natural God-giving skills, whatever those are, and creating platforms and ideas and whatever. The pandemic hit. And then suddenly there was economic turmoil, and basically 2 years of pandemic really really broke my spirit. Like I just could not. I really struggled with being proud and fulfilled with motherhood and housewifery, as I like to call it, because I actually am very, very good at both, but they do not fulfill me in the way that these other things do. In a very simple way, I just felt like I lost myself and my identity. But I gave you and Pablo everything, and I'm glad that I gave Pablo everything, but I was resentful that I had given everything. I remember telling you, like, how come I have to give up my dreams and entertainment, but you don't? And I remember you telling me, like, I deserve it, Like, I don't know if you do, essentially.
Well, first of all, we remember back in two different realities often.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And like what you just said doesn't sound like anything that I would ever say or a sentiment that I believe. That like as recently as turning 40 a couple of years ago, I felt like
you were so happy. I remember.
When I searched my soul, I just felt like I had gotten everything that I wanted, and if I died early, it was okay because I'd lived this really great life. And it hurts me. You and I just look at things differently, and we always have, and you've always got a slightly, in my opinion, darker view of everything, and you think that I see things with rose-colored glasses.
Yes, because you were raised in the land of Oz, and I was raised in Kansas, black and white city. That's why.
Ruth Vaca was a child of Mexican immigrants who came to Chicago. She headed to New York City to turn herself into a media personality, as she long dreamed, when she met Ray. They've been together for 13 years. Ray loved that Ruth was the only person besides himself who believed he could do it as much as he did. But Ruth never wanted to be a Mary Hatch, the unsung hero. She, too, was a George Bailey with big dreams.
Like in my head, 5 years ago, I imagined ourselves in the present now having a company that raked in at least $300,000, just not for ourselves net income, but like as a as a company. Because that's how much I believe in you, Ray. Like if anything, that was like peanuts. I was like, me and Ray doing a company, working together, like, watch out, world. Like, it's just, that's why. And then the pandemic happened, and then motherhood happened, and then depression happened, and all of a sudden I'm just like, wait a minute, what's happening? You know what I mean? I lost focus, I lost sight, I lost everything, and I feel so bad about that, because I felt like I could have definitely done more, but I just couldn't, you know. I was not capable, I was not well. But also, it's like, why didn't Mary and why didn't Ray ever fucking notice how bad Ruth and George were doing? Because you guys were so busy in your bliss, that's why.
Yeah.
Which is fine and normal, and a very normal marriage issue that happens. But it's most likely caused to women, and women like me, you know. We hear about cases like me, like, she could have been somebody, but she gave up her life for her successful husband.
So it's like, it does bother me that, like, I'll think back to some time in our past and I see it very, like, romantically and sentimentally, and every time you talk back, you're like, oh yeah, but we didn't even have like a box spring under the bed at that point. It was just a mattress on the floor. I've been it's been like, I haven't had frills in 14 years since I met you. And it's just like, well, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm such a fuck up.
First of all, the thing is that, like, you romanticize struggle, whereas I don't. I get angry at struggle. I do not like to struggle. I struggle often, and I don't want to romanticize it.
After they resolve the day where everybody puts all the money in the basket and all this kind of stuff, and he, you know, kind of can move on to his happy ending, right?
Valerie again, Ray's mom.
I predict that he realizes, based on how Mary caused the town to come together after making a few phone calls, he realized what great networking skills she has, and how level-headed she is, and what a money manager she is. He makes her the COO of the building and loan, because he's still going to be the dreamer. He always will. That's just who he is, right?
So that prediction is interesting, because my favorite, I've asked everybody, what would you have seen for the sequel, or what would you have hoped happened to George, Mary, the Bedford Falls folks, and wide array of predictions. My favorite, as of now, has not found a place in the podcast yet. I think it was Wendell Jameson from the New York Times, but he pointed out, and this is kind of interesting, like, so, okay, George maybe gets prosecuted for the inability to find that $8,000, but he's got a great face and a lot of character references. He's not going to do any time. Gets off with probation, but it's pretty sure they're not going to let him run a bank or a savings and loan ever again. And I said to myself, that would be the greatest thing that ever happened to George. The real happy ending would have been the year after. And he literally, that weight comes off his shoulders, because as much as he wants to sacrifice for the community, he can't do it in that way anymore. And now his future is unwritten. And who takes over the building and loan? It's not going to be Uncle Billy. So I say Mary ends up running that thing by 47. Yeah.
Yeah, she does it, and then she's got, you know, the stable income. So what do you think he goes on to do then? If the weight's off his shoulders, now he can fly.
Well, I don't know who takes care of the kids, but of course one option is always in the 1950s there, when he's in his mid-40s, he goes back to college, and he does get that architect degree.
Yes. And, yes. And the first thing he does is practice on his own home.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it turns out he's way better at fixing up the Granville home than Mary. It turns out they're much better in each other's roles.
So in this age of endless sequels and shared universes and franchises, why has there never been a real serious sequel to Wonderful Life? And what would your vision for a perfect Wonderful Life sequel look like?
Well, first of all, why are you asking me about a sequel?
Ray is talking with Sarah and her sister Perrine, granddaughters of Wonderful Life short story writer Philip Van Doren Stern, the holders of control, for the most part, over a sequel.
Well, because I go chronological, and when I got to the end, I thought to myself, you look at the future.
I've honestly never thought about a sequel.
Our mother was really hopeful that somebody could take the core ideas of it and make something really for the 21st century. America is very different now. But the message of the movie is still something we need to hear. Imagining not having been born, imagining not having been given the greatest gift of life, to run that thought experiment in your mind. I mean, that's an extremely powerful idea. And that could all be applied in a very contemporary, urgent setting of our time. And I don't know if anybody can do that or not. It'd be neat if somebody really creative came up with a way to do it.
My pitch to you, you go Godfather 2 style with it. You do his father's story, him and Uncle Billy, why they created it around 1906, the building of Loan.
And what happened?
Young Potter, and then you interweave it with Susu heading to New York to talk to Uncle Wainwright in the 1960s, and maybe Violet comes along to help, and then
Why don't you submit a treatment?
maybe I will. I actually have a late job interview. In between my podcasts, I'm not able to make my full year's income, so I'm always landing like another gig.
You know what it's like to be kind of, I mean, I didn't want to use the word hustle, but there's a bit of a hustle, right? And it's a weird thing to be a creative person who's hustling with the products of your mind, but that's what he was doing. And that's what I'm hearing.
Crazy respect for him. Crazy respect for you all. Thank you. It's so nice to have formed a relationship with you, and I hope it continues into the future.
Well, we're really keen to see this podcast, and I love your interest in this and the questions you ask, and we'll be avid listeners.
Thank you both. I expect that you're going to really like it, but if that's not the case, no, you're going to really like it. So that's going to be the case.
Look, I know what became of George and Mary and the rest. Their world is very different from yours because of the butterfly effect of their existence, their seemingly small acts over their lives that rippled through their universe. But we have rules, and one of them is not to share information from other parts of the multiverse. It's a free will thing. We found a way to loophole that by bringing you the story of the first half of George's life through the movie Wonderful Life. That was the part you need to know. For the rest of the story, well, you'll just have to use your imagination.
So, Pablo, I will let you stay up just a little later if I can show you a little of my favorite movie.
Okay.
It's a Christmas movie.
Christmas movie. I like Christmas movies.
Yeah.
But what is it all about?
What's it all about? Yeah. Well, that's what I just spent the last year trying to figure out.
Pablo is the fourth generation of his family to be introduced to Wonderful Life. And although he is too young to understand the movie yet, Ray can't help himself and tries anyway, as Ruth rolls her eyes.
They sent to Bay. Why?
Said what?
They sent to Bay. Why?
Well, they're worried about him because he's feeling really sad about himself. He doesn't think he's helped anybody in life. He doesn't think he matters or anyone cares about him. He's very sad. See, this whole movie, he ends up getting to find out that actually he really helped a whole lot of people in the town just by being kind of a nice guy. Just doing what he could when he could. You know, like if your friend doesn't have a toy and you lend him your toy and it makes him happy, and doing that with a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of times in your life makes a big difference for all those people that you did those little things for.
She slid down the hill. And now he's scared of the ice.
Yeah. Alright, well, I just wanted to show you the beginning. We gotta get you to bed. And I know, it's a little old for you. You'll watch it when you're a little older.
You mean all of it?
Yeah.
Oh. Hey, Mommy.
I love you so much.
I love you so much too.
God, it's Daddy and Pablo, and we want to thank you for another day on this planet.
and another day under the roof of this house, and another day with Mommy and everybody that we love. And please God continue to bless us and protect us.
As for how things will turn out for Ray and Ruth, your guess is as good as mine. As a character from Ray's childhood obsession, Back to the Future put it, inspired in part by Wonderful Life,
Your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Both of you.
those of you who have taken this journey with me, as I said in the first episode, you live in one of the universes where George Bailey was never born. So, if that bothers you, there's only one solution. You have to become the George Bailey. Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're only one person. What can you do? Never forget, each life touches so many other lives. Each seemingly small act of kindness you do will end up affecting everyone else on earth, long into the future. You have a lot of value.
This series is dedicated to the memory of Menzo Case. George Bailey was never born. Visit SaveGeorgeBailey.com to join the mission. There you'll find links to works by this episode's participants. Learn more about how to celebrate George Bailey Day on Saturday, December 9th, and annually the second Saturday of December hereafter by hosting your own Wonderful Life viewing party. Tell your friends to listen to this show, subscribe, like, comment, and post about it on social media, #SaveGeorgeBailey. Subscribe to our Patreon to hear uncut interviews and bonus content. Podcast also available on YouTube. iHeartMedia presents a Double Asterisk iHeartMedia co-production in association with True Stories. Created, written, and directed by Joseph, Kurt Engfer, and Ray Nowosielski. Kurt Engfer, producer and supervising editor. Ray Nowosielski, producer and journalist. Elizabeth Marcus, editor. Roy Sillings, narrator. George Bailey theme song by Carolyn Sills. Buy her albums. Soundtrack composed by Zachary Walter. Buy his albums and the original soundtrack to this podcast available wherever you get your music. Mallory Kenoy, co-producer, writer's assistant, archival producer and fact-checker, and co-writer for this episode. John Autry, sound engineer, additional editing, sound design, and mix. Executive producers, Dave Cassidy, Kurt Engfer, Lindsay Hoffman and Beth Ann Macaluso for iHeartMedia, John Duffy for Double Asterisk, Ruth Vaca for True Stories, Ray Nowosielski for Double Asterisk and True Stories. Elizabeth Hankuch, associate producer. Brandon Lavoie and Ryan Pennington, consulting producers. Keith Sklar, contract legal. Peter Yazzie, copyright and fair use legal. Maddie Akers, archival specialist. Ron Kadish and Benji Michaels, publicists. Kavya Santhanam and Marley Weaver, marketing and promotions. Art and web design by Aaron Kim. Interns were Kyra Gray, Emma Ramirez, Eva Stewart, and Taya Wilson. Podcast license for Philip Van Doren Stern's The Greatest Gift provided by The Greatest Gift Corporation. Their attorney is Kevin Koloff. Recorded at David Weber's Airtime Studios in Bloomington, Indiana. This episode featured in chronological order Lindsay Hoffman, myself, Ray Nowosielski, Ruth Vaca, Jimmy Stewart, my uncle, not the actor, Ed Charlak, Tom Tenowich, Kurt Engfer, Hannah Ermey, Matt Asner, Ed Asner, Pete Davidson, Jason Sudeikis, Brendan Fraser, Danny Rubin, Menzo Case, Val Stewart Nowosielski, Laura Robinson, Perrine Robinson Geller, and Pablo Anthony Nowosielski Vaca. The cast of Wonderful Life and the brief voices, music, and artistry of Hollywood public persons and news media professionals, including Barbara Koppel, via clips used under the still existing legal doctrine of fair use. The Potters are working on that one, though. The iHeart pitch scene was reconstructed from real audio recorded during that time and one line of new audio from Lindsay Hoffman, based on an email from Beth Ann Macaluso. My phone call with Kurt Engfer was mostly our original conversation and a little scripted from actual conversations we had previously. Same with the call with my mom, Valerie. Same with the conversation between Ruth and I. Audio of the Asner Center Wonderful Life table reads of 2020, 21, and 22 provided by Matt Asner and the Asner Center with sign-off from the Greatest Gift Corporation, with thanks to their attorney Kevin Koloff. My uncle Rocky Duffin's funeral provided by his widow Sharon Duffin, my aunt. My short film premiere party when I was 15 was shot and provided by my dad, Tony Nowosielski. Watching Wonderful Life with Pablo was the actual raw recording as it happened. He didn't know I was recording and was not coached. He's so smart and charming, isn't he? Exciting future for that one. If you're in Seneca Falls, visit the Wonderful Life Museum, the Women's Rights National Historical Park, Menzo Case's beloved Generations Bank, Cafe 19, and Seneca County Habitat for Humanity. If you're in Brownsburg, Indiana, visit the Ray Nowosielski Museum. Sure to be built any day now, right? If you're in Pekin, Illinois, God help you. Go to double-media.com to hear our other limited-run podcasts, Who is Rich Blee? After the Uprising, with a bold new season in St. Louis coming summer 2024, and Origins, Birth of a Pandemic. And subscribe to True Stories' new weekly, Everybody Has a Podcast, with Ruth and Ray. If you are feeling like you're on the bridge, please call the AFSP's Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 into your phone, or contact the crisis text line by texting 741-741. Consider donating to or volunteering with AFSP or your local Habitat for Humanity, and make George Bailey proud. We're not affiliated with them, though. Copyright 2023 Inc.